This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and I'm super happy to have in the studio with me Robert, also Rob Weissman, the president of Public Citizen, citizen.org, and you can tweet him at public_citizen. Rob, welcome to the program. It's great having you in the studio with us.
Good to be with you.
It's and you guys do such great work, and I've been such a big fan of Public Citizen forever. And I got this email from you. I mean, me and 10,000 of our best friends, right, got this, or however many you send, 100,000, whatever. It says, Tom, I'm just back from outside the museum in Washington, D.C., where a lively band of protesters demonstrated outside a Koch brothers event on tax policy, keynoted by Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin. Now, that sentence made my head explode. Wait a minute. The Koch brothers are running an event in Washington, D.C., with Steve Mnuchin, the guy from Goldman Sachs, who's now our Treasury Secretary, about tax policy. It's like, what's the old saying, when the elephants dance, the mice get squished, or whatever. What the heck is going on?
Just what it seems like. So we have tax policy that's going to be brought to us by Goldman Sachs and the Koch brothers, which is just a marriage made in
hell.
Yeah, unbelievable greed, insatiable greed, and then a sort of fascistic anti-government ideology married, and a tax proposal that we don't have the details of, but we know the outlines of. And, the short version is slash taxes on the super rich and corporations. That's it. That's the story.
And well, typically there's a throw the dog a bone in there. I mean, with George W. Bush, when he wanted to cut taxes, it was actually Bernie who shamed him into it. He was like, if you're going to have a tax cut, you have to at least give a couple $100 to the average person, And so they threw in everybody got a $300 check, as I recall,
right.
Or maybe it was $200. I remember when I got mine. And what amazed me was on the back of it where you sign it, it said something like this, President George W. Bush made it possible for you to get this tax, there was a sales pitch on the damn thing. And I'd be surprised if they didn't do something like that.
Yeah, I think that will be part of it. Mnuchin, when they were in the early portion of talking about taxes back in like February or whatever, he said, this is only going to be a middle-class tax cut. Everything's middle class. And there will be no tax cut on the rich. And some people label that Mnuchin's rule. Well, that rule has been smashed to smithereens, because we know the outline of what they proposed. And it's like no inheritance tax, slashing the rate on corporations from 35% to 15%, no alternative minimum tax, which means
Trump is going to stop paying taxes altogether.
That would, the 1 year we know about, that would have helped save him about $20 million.
Right.
Let super rich people who run their lives as corporations like Donald Trump pay taxes at the corporate rate instead of the individual rate, which means he personally would go down from 35% to 15%.
Right. The Trump Organization has over 500 of these pass-through entities.
That's right.
That all basically just pass through to his personal tax return.
Right. And just no reason why you'd have a corporate structure like that unless you're just trying to evade taxes.
Right. Yeah. Why? Yeah. Who wants to create 500 companies? I mean, it makes no sense. So what are the Koch brothers and Mnuchin up to in this larger frame of we want to make life easier for billionaires in America and harder for working class people?
So in terms of beyond, you may remember that Mnuchin and Gary Cohn, the other Goldman Sachs guy who's running economic policy, put out a one-page supposed outline, bullet points of the Trump tax plan. Apparently that was all they could manage, was one page. Maybe they were trying to explain it to Trump.
I think that probably had to do with Trump's attention span.
So we don't really know anything at all about details. But we do know really more about the politics of how it's going to play out. And there's going to be some very complicated problems for them in Congress. And I think at the end of the day, I would bet that they're going to fail, but they're going to make a big play. The Koch brothers and their main front group, Americans for Prosperity, launched their tax initiative at this event at the museum that I and others were protesting outside of. They're going to do dozens of events around the country trying to show the grassroots support for what they're going to call tax reform, which is really just tax cuts for the rich.
Are they rolling out the Tea Party? They created this infrastructure through Americans for Prosperity and a bunch of other front groups. They funded these Tea Party groups. They hired buses, painted them, hundreds of thousands of dollars per bus, painted them, drove people in, all this. to create this appearance of a grassroots uprising against Obamacare in 2009, as I recall, and then use that as a political cudgel. Are they bringing back the old band, or are they creating a whole brand new one?
Well, I think it's evolved, and we'll see. How they sell to their people, because they do have some real people that they should be out on the streets to protest to help Goldman Sachs. That'll be fun to watch. But
they're doing it right now. I mean, you've got people who will get into a fist fight defending Donald Trump, having 5 Goldman Sachs guys sitting, within 100 feet of him in the White House.
But one thing that's happened since 2009 is that this group, Americans for Prosperity, has really built itself up. So they're doing more now through the organization, their centralized organization, which has chapters everywhere, than they did, I think, back in the 2009, 2010 period. So we'll see. They're promising that. And then there's another sort of more mainline traditional corporate conservative group says they're throwing $20 million in TV ads to push the tax plan, Americans for the American Action Fund.
Right.
Starting that initiative right now.
Now, this is a great, Americans for Prosperity and the allied pieces of basically the Koch network that are operating on the ground across the United States, from what I've read, are more well-financed than the Republican Party, have more employees than the Republican Party, have more offices than the Republican Party. How can the Republican Party, and basically are defining policy for the Republican Party, and then through ALEC, they're actually writing the laws that the Republican Party is passing. Would it be inappropriate to say that basically the Republican Party has ceased to exist and has become the Koch party? And if so, what does that mean for the future of American politics?
Well, it's not just the Koch party. There are other factions, like the U.S. Chamber of Commerce is another faction. They've got a big role in deciding what Republican party politics are. But
and then you got people like Adelson, who's all about Israel, and Mercer, who's all about.
Yeah, you've got all these sort of crazy little centers of power, in which will all come from big money.
Right.
But you're absolutely right that this Americans for Prosperity, in terms of grassroots presence, office presence, on the ground presence, and investment in information technology, they're bigger and more advanced than the Republican Party. They're probably, as an aside, and you know this well as me, bigger probably and more advanced than the Democratic Party too.
Yes.
They're trying to create a real structure, and both main parties are themselves shells of what traditional parties involving real people, organizing them down to the precinct level, used to be.
And this, would this have been possible under the 1973 reforms that were struck down by the Supreme Court in '76 in the Buckley decision? I mean, has there been how do you control oligarch power? Jimmy Carter was on this program 2 years ago, and he said, America is no longer a democracy. It's an oligarchy with unlimited political bribery. Yeah. And I was just like, and he just said it.
Yes. Right?
It's gone viral on the internet. You can find it on YouTube. And I was just shocked that he was so blunt, but he was just totally matter of fact about that. What do we do? What is Public Citizen doing? Citizen.org.
As you know, it's not just one thing.
Right.
And some of these things would be possible even without Buckley and that horrible line of decisions, and some of them wouldn't be. Right. I think that's a good place to start, is starting with the money in politics and getting money out of electoral politics and the big money dominance. So we have to overturn Citizens United. For a glimmer of time, there was a real prospect of doing that through the Supreme Court. That's now off the table for decades. So,
because of Gorsuch.
Yeah. And just we're gonna be stuck with the Supreme Court for a long time.
Back to the lockdown court right now.
Absent something quite extraordinary. So we're going to have to win the constitutional amendment to both overturn Citizens United, overturn Buckley, and take away some of these corporate rights. We can do some other important things with money in politics reform, even while Citizens United is in place, starting with public financing. But we're going to have to deal with that. Right. And then it's a long set of things. But to the Kochs, these are reinforcing things, and that's why tax is so important. The concentration of wealth gives them the political power, which they get through money. They invest the money to then push policies that let them concentrate more wealth. So it becomes this horrible cycle. And there's not one place to intervene, but we do have to intervene.
Yeah. So the primary pressure point for somebody who is listening right now, obviously, go to citizens.org, become part of Public Citizen, be an activist in this regard. You're one of the better on-the-ground organizations out there, and you're doing great work. What are the other things that people can and should be doing? Where should we be focusing our attention? What is central and what is peripheral?
Well, for the next little while, this tax debate is going to be central. So I think anything that is going on in local communities to deal with the tax issue, that's going to be huge. And then I wish we could say that Trump was just kind of a sidelight and doesn't get to the real core issues of power, which is true in its way, except the president is not a sidelight, and a guy who's flirting with fascism is we can't just sort of brush him aside. So I think all the mobilization, the anti-Trump mobilization, has been extraordinary, starting with the Women's March and then defeating healthcare repeal legislation. That's been, I think, crucial and really just shows that being in the streets is more important than anything. And then if there's one last issue for people to grab onto, I think coming out of that, stopping the rollback of Medicaid, we're going to have a real chance now to drive forward the move for single payer, for real Medicare for all. I think people should spend some time on that. We're not going to win it the next year or two, but we are going to win it.
Well, as a starting point, there was a legislation introduced to just drop the eligibility age to 55. That's one of those things where the health insurance companies are probably not going to aggressively lobby against it, which is why they didn't aggressively lobby against Medicare to begin with, because the older somebody is, the more expensive they are.
I'm not sure the insurers will go along with it, but I agree. I think that's the stepwise way to go.
Yeah. So you start there, and then the second step would be throwing a public option into Obamacare.
I'm not big on the public option. I worry, but that actually sort of has the cherry picking problem and lets insurance companies get off easy. I would then expand it to include kids. Yeah, bring under 18 in, so every kid.
This is Robert Ball, the guy who invented Medicare. Famously, well, not so famously. Actually, most people don't know about it. He and LBJ planned on Medicare being the national health.
That was for everybody. And by the way, to close the circle, Jimmy Carter just come out now, plain speaking, time for single payer.
Wow, that's wonderful. Rob Weissman, the president of Public Citizen, citizen.org. Rob, thanks so much for being with us.
Good to be with you as always.
Great having you in the studio. We'll be back. It's coming up on, 18 and a half minutes past the